Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dojo Live. Today is Thursday, November 4th, 2021. This is the last show for this week before we have a rebroadcast tomorrow. So we have a show almost every day, practically every day. Welcome again. I'm Sir broadcasting from Southern California, and joining me are correspondent in Cuernavaca, Mexico, and Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico. Guys, notice that I try to mix up who I introduce every day differently so that I keep it fair. Thanks for joining today. And of course, Mark Ruddock, who is the CEO of NULA, is joining us today. Thanks for being with us, Mark. We're looking forward to speaking with you.
My pleasure.
So we're talking about small businesses today, and in particular, the needs of those small businesses as it relates to financial services. But before we go into the topic of conversation and see what we can unpack and learn, let's get to know our guest a little bit. Mark, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll talk about your company. Let's get to know you a little bit.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. A little bit about me. I'm a technologist by training, so came out of the University of Toronto with a computer science degree. I'm a bit of a mutt in terms of my upbringing. I was born in Jamaica, lived in England, grew up in Canada. I'm sort of a bit of a hybrid of many things. I've had an interesting career, which has largely been focused on entrepreneurship. So during university, founded a company which grew quite quickly, actually, and was acquired by what eventually became SAP. So through a series of acquisitions, it became part of the SAP organization. And that was an enterprise software company. So that was big ticket sales, hard to do, right? Very sort of hard, heavy lifting stuff. And after that, I went to work for one of the venture capitalists who had backed the company as an entrepreneur in residence. And there I met a fascinating group of guys who were building the next generation of mobile tech. And went in as the CEO of that to a completely different business from the one I'd founded. Grew Vigo to be one of the most highly downloaded BlackBerry apps actually at that time when it was acquired by BlackBerry in 2011 or so. And then my career took a bit of a turn. I ended up working in online financial services and most importantly in consumer financial services and really focusing outside of North America. So spending time in Europe and Southern Africa, and then eventually, as I kind of moved one run role to another, encompassing Eastern Europe and South America as well. So a really fascinating place to kind of be educated. So I have this hybrid of enterprise software, mobile software, and online consumer financial services. And that's really, in some respects, what's behind what we're building now at NULA.
Excellent. Mark, I'm so glad you're with us today. These guys are always making fun of me because when we talk about a place or a city, they say Tulio's probably been there or lived there. See, there's other people that fit that category too.
Absolutely.
So, you're a rare breed.
So, Mark, tell us a little bit about NULA. What's the charter? What's it all about? What gave birth to this idea, and what do you guys do?
Yeah, so I think the best way to give you some background on NULA is to talk a bit about the thesis that I had coming out of spending time in consumer financial services in the rest of the world. There were a few things that were really clear to me. One was that we'd seen a significant amount of innovation in consumer finance. We'd seen the rise of neobanks, of mobile first thinking, of kind of reimagined user experiences. And there were many different companies that were attacking kind of the old school financial services infrastructure. And they were doing so creatively and making significant headway. And I guess the two kind of thoughts I had as I was looking to what I wanted to do next was, one, none of that was happening yet in the small business financial services sector. It was significantly lagging that innovation. And that's always a really interesting time to go in and formulate change, right? Those are points of inflection. And the other thing was that the rest of world was really ahead of North America. So the financial services innovation, even in the small business sector, was not happening in North America. It was happening outside. It was happening in sub-Saharan Africa and South America and Asia and even to some extent, Northern Europe. And so when I was offered a chance to look at a role in the small business sector, it intrigued me. And so the role that I was offered was a fascinating company that was 20 years old. It was effectively a lot like an on deck, right? So it was a lender using alternate lending strategies to unlock capital to the underserved. That was its overall mandate. But it was such an interesting place because it had this combination of 20 years of deep experience understanding small businesses and very little real technology. To some extent, it was a model of what I had seen happen. And the venture team that asked me to come and join the company and execute this transformation basically said to me, we totally agree with this thesis that this space is ripe for innovation, and we'd like you to do it here. And I thought to myself, this is a 20-year-old mechanical Turk of a small business lender. How am I going to turn it into, a modern app? And yet, when I got to know the people and I got a chance to get to know, the board and the team, I realized that there was this hunger really for change. And that was the story of how we began the journey almost 2 years ago now to create what is now NULA.
That's great. So what exactly does NULA do? What do you offer to small businesses?
Yeah, so I think that the way to think about this lies in what was broken in the small business financial services space. So it was very difficult and very expensive to acquire customers. And there was always a war for the customer's attention. So you'd sell them a loan, and then when that loan was ready for renewal, everyone was after them, and you had to try and win them back, and then you had to win them back, and then you had to win them back. And the fundamental problem was that when you were trying to sell your product, you basically had to get married on the first date. So if you'd paid for the customer to come to your website to show them your offering, maybe the customer wasn't ready for a loan that day, or maybe that loan wasn't really the right one for them at that particular point in time. So maybe 1 in 10 of them took you up on the offer. But the problem with lending is that there are two decision makers. There is the buyer and the seller. And so by the time the buyer goes through the onboarding process, the seller is probably going to say no thank you to 90% of the people coming in. And so there's a tremendous amount of wastage in the traditional way of serving small businesses. And so we decided to turn everything upside down. So we said, what if we don't have to get married on the first day? What if we can create an app that small business owners are going to love to use every day, that will give them access to the key metrics that they need to stay on top of their business? Could be managing their cash and forecasting the future. Could be keeping an eye on their business and personal credit files, because those are used by lenders to judge whether you're going to get business capital. Could be what your customers are saying about you. Did someone have a bad experience last night at your restaurant? And do you need to know about it now across all the different social networks, right? So you can do something about it. So basically, to give small business owners access to useful content and useful tools that would help them run their businesses better. But that, in effect, was a trade for data. And that data allowed us to have a much more intimate and nuanced view of the financial health of these customers by doing it the old school way, which was having a look at their credit file and the last 6 months of bank statements. And so NULA really is a play to acquire, engage, right, and activate small businesses into a relationship with us that allows us to get to know them in a way that we never would, and find the right product for them at the right time, not necessarily force that marriage on the first day problem. So by using this data, we can unlock a suite of financial products, some of which we manufacture, and some of which are manufactured by a carefully curated set of partners, to try and create this sort of virtuous cycle, if you want, of a great place to be, where you get things for free that are useful to you every day, but in doing that, you unlock a new generation of financial products. And that's basically what NULA is about.
Brilliant. It's amazing to me how many financial services organizations treat small businesses like it's a widget sell. It's a relationship, right? So let's go right into the topic today and see what else we can learn. Kim, please kick it off.
Thank you, Tulio. Thank you, Mark. So today's topic, as chosen by you, Mark, is the intersection of data and design. reimagining small business financial services. More specifically, a new generation of small business owner is demanding mobile first, transparent and flexible financial products. Mark, as we get further into our conversation today, the question that I have for you is why? Why was this your topic of choice?
In a way, data and design are at the heart of what we're doing. We knew that something fundamental was changing in the entrepreneurial class, right? We knew that a new generation of digital natives were becoming small business entrepreneurs, and their expectations were being defined not by the way they would go to their local bank and interact with them today. They were being defined by the rest of their digital lives, right? How they were using different apps at different times to unlock access to a broad range of services that they wanted. And that gap between their expectations and how people were served really, I think, is a combination of reimagining the user experience for them. In other words, simplifying small business financial products, making them easier to onboard and use and interact with every day. And data, because without that data, either you cannot unlock access to the credit or you can't iteratively learn and improve the product. So we started down the journey of saying, we wanted to create a very compelling user experience that was beautiful and elegant and transparent and simple. But we knew that in order to figure these people out and to get them credit earlier than they otherwise might be able to, we were going to have to look deeply into their data. We were going to have to understand them in a way that banks typically didn't understand them. We weren't going to look at kind of the one-dimensional credit file. We were going to look at their social sentiment. We were going to look at their cash flow performance, not only at the day of the loan, but every day going forward. So we could find that right balance of how much credit to offer them as they earn their way up the curve. We wanted to look potentially at pieces of data that we weren't sure would be helpful yet, but might help us triangulate things like their cloud accounting information, or their Shopify store data, or their Stripe or Square payments data. And we sort of felt that somewhere in this mix of this powerful deep data with some great algorithms, right? And this new kind of design where things were as seamless as possible because the algorithms were making the decision, not humans, that we would find this mix of what the next generation of a small business financial services organization would look like. And so that's really why I think that it comes down to data and design at the end of the day.
What I kind of hear is this you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of novel thing in the financial world. Because when you're looking out for the future of these small businesses, I mean, as a lender, you're protecting yourself, but you're also helping them be much more successful, which in turn, with that reciprocity, it's really great, actually, by offering so much more value beyond here's your loan.
I think, one of the things that I learned in the consumer sector when I was working in particular with subprime borrowers was that there was a difference between their aspiration and the way they were treated. And the same thing happens in small businesses. Small business owners are aspirational people. They're building something that they truly believe is great. And yet the way they're seen, right, by banks and others traditionally is completely the antithesis of that. And so the question really became, could we, by getting to know them in a more fulsome manner, could we make a bet on them earlier than we otherwise might? And if we structured the product in a way where we didn't have to give them $500,000 on the first date and have it paid back over 18 months, which is sort of the traditional lending paradigm, right? But instead, perhaps we would unlock a highly flexible line of credit that they could start with $50,000 and maybe earn their way up the curve. We could get them and unlock that credit to them earlier. And why does this matter? It matters because small businesses obviously are the powerhouse of our economic engine. And the ability to unlock capital into that powerhouse ultimately has trickle-down impacts into the economy and employment and all of these sorts of things. And so coming out of this pandemic, we found this problem was even more distilled in a way, right, than ever before. Because you could look at a business that historically had been a very good business, and yet for the last 6 to 9 to 12 months looked like a horrible business because it was forcibly closed due to, restrictions or consumer behavior temporarily shifted and people didn't go into restaurants anymore and all those things. So this notion of breaking the credit from a big, retroactive, large decision where you were making a long-term bet on historical data to making smaller bets on the basis of continuous data that would evolve and grow as these companies evolved themselves and grew, that to us felt like the right idea at the right time, right? So, and if you were to look at government mandates, whether they be in Europe or in North America or in South America or whatever, there is, I think, an awareness now that unlocking credit to previously disenfranchised or disadvantaged groups is absolutely critical in creating economic power, right, and economic health. So I think these things all come together in an interesting way.
Mark, quick question. In terms of adoption of NULA, have you seen that there's the adoption level is greater in specific types of businesses? And I'm talking about, for example, brick and mortar type of businesses versus the digital space. So where's your, if applicable, of course, when I said digital space very loosely. So where have you seen the greatest adoption? And also, where have you seen the most resistance to to adoption?
That's a very interesting question. So I think as we look at the dimensions of the businesses we serve, I think it's less about whether they are brick and mortar or e-commerce businesses, and more about their kind of demographics and their nature. So let me give you an example. Today, we are attracting lots of early adopters because the people that will be more open-minded to look at an app like this are the first to ever download it. And so they actually span a broad spectrum of business types. But the businesses that we can serve today with the first products coming out on the platform, and I'm not talking here about the tools that you can use every day, those are applicable to everybody. But the first financial products are more geared to, I would say, small businesses with between 1 and 20 employees. Right? Not so much the 50 plus employee businesses that are venture backed, and not so much, the sole prop that's got sort of a side hustle. And, I think we've got this sort of, call it, 5 million of the 30 million small businesses in the United States. That's the first place we are focusing our effort. Now, what are we discovering about these businesses? Well, we're asking for quite a lot of information, right? We're asking for them to give us access to their bank transactional data. We're asking for them to give us access to all of their customer sentiment data. And so there's a psychological difference in our audience between, let's say, younger, more millennial, more digital native type entrepreneurs who are more willing to share that information as a matter of course. And let's say the more traditional businesses, and there's a lot of them, by the way, because, there are many businesses owned by 50 plus year olds. I'm a 50 plus year old, who are far more cautious about parting with that data. So I think what we've seen is a mix of younger businesses and younger entrepreneurs be the first to adopt. The work we're doing, though, is to create a notional safe space for the more traditional businesses to trust us so that they can get, that journey with us going in a way. And I think the answer to your question is this is now and that is then. And as we build our brand, we will see a shift in trust and other things evolve. And so, I would expect that to be changing all the time. Now, what we have seen is significant interest in the product. So just to put it into perspective, we've really been in the US App Store now for about 4 months. And we have been doing very limited marketing at this stage because we're really in a test and learn phase. And I put a post on LinkedIn actually a couple of days ago, sort of talking a little bit about the growth, but we delivered in October 3.7 times the number of businesses that had onboarded and registered on the platform lifetime to date. And the month before, it was about 2.4 times. So we're seeing this exponential growth in interest. And that's actually quite appealing. That gives us a sense that there's a demand here. But to go back to your design and data question, we have a lot of work to do to create the kind of app that is going to be worthy of people coming in every day and every week. And that's a huge part of our thinking. I spent, half an hour just before this call in one of our weekly design sessions where we talk about, where are we seeing friction in the app, right? Where are we seeing places where there's drop off? Where are we seeing places where customers are clearly frustrated or confused? And we instrument that app as well. So the third kind of pillar of data, Kim, to you is we watch everything. We watch all the behavior of the app. We watch kind of where people go, how much time they spend. And we try to use that in our design thinking to sort of make this process as smooth as possible. So, to me, NULA is a journey that is going to go on for a long time. And that journey, I hope, will never stop, this kind of constant innovation cycle that we have internally, right? Where we ask ourselves every day, how could this be better? I mean, I literally have a dashboard to my left, right behind this monitor, that has got real-time statistics across the entire platform right now. And the reason I have two big 38-inch monitors on my desk is I can't not look at that all day, right? It's pathological a little bit. But I would say that, this is a journey we're on, Carlos, and we're going to learn about these entrepreneurs and we're going to adjust our behavior in real time. But right now we're indexing to younger and, let's say, more interested in early adoption.
Thank you. Appreciate
Mark,
it.
I love and I appreciate the process you guys are following in terms of taking the customer through a journey, the design thinking process, and I love the use of contextual data. I'm curious, historically, banks didn't have access to this kind of data in the past, so they had to rely on historical information, right, to make the decision to manage the risk. And it's really unfair to a small business who perhaps opens a restaurant and there's great reviews, which indicates that they're going to get more traffic, and where they need it the most is to support that growth in those stages, but don't have the historical data to get the funding they need to keep up the pace of demand. So this is a fantastic way to marry both the current state plus the potential for the future state. But how do you guys manage the risks? How are you getting through that challenge as a lender to manage the risk with this additional contextual information?
I think the answer is that we try to break the problem down into more digestible pieces. Now, the big benefit of being a 20-year-old small business lender is that we have 20 years of experience in our DNA, understanding what signals tend to indicate likelihood of success, default, failure, whatever. And so we've baked that thinking into our algorithms, for sure. But we're complementing that, which is what we call our bedrock underwriting kind of decision criteria. We complement that with two things. One is additional pieces of information, like real-time cash flow, for example, that allow us not only to monitor the historical health of a business when we underwrite the loan, but to continuously monitor the health of the business as they use the line of credit that's built into NULA. And we use that to make decisions literally on a daily basis about what credit they should have available right now and how much their draw should or shouldn't be. And when we detect signs of angst or risk or whatever, we can adjust accordingly. So I think we take this bedrock of underwriting data and we use this new data to complement it. We don't just say, if your restaurant is on OpenTable and you are seeing 10x growth in reservations and your reviews are 5 stars and it looks like things are going gangbusters, that's the only thing we're going to look at. To us, I think that data is additive. But the big shift in the thinking, I think, at BFS has been a move away from rearward underwriting to forward-facing and continuous underwriting. And that can only happen when you remove humans as the primary underwriting, kind of algorithm and replace it with largely machine-driven algorithms. And we still, by the way, have human underwriters, which will keep an eye on what the algorithms kind of alert them to as potential risk scenarios. And why is that? because in many markets, the US is a good example, there is discontinuous data available to us or no data available to us to identify certain things that we think are very important. For example, when you're onboarding into a loan today, not every state has ownership and kind of business information in a simple, easy to access API form. It's sort of there in some ways. Some of it's kept up to date and some of it's not. So if you're going to give someone a $100,000 line of credit, you probably need to double check a few of these things, and it's not always possible to do it. So I would say that this is a journey as well, right? It is to say, we've got 20 years of experience. We're going to use that as the bedrock, but we're going to complement that with as many signals as we can have. But by moving away from a human-only underwriting model to an algorithmic with perhaps human oversight model, we can digest so much more data than ever before. And we can digest it across more dimensions, and we can digest it with greater granularity, right? And I think that's the fundamental shift.
We could talk for hours on this topic because I'm brilliantly impressed for two reasons. Number one, the fact that you're dynamically daily managing the data to provide more value as needed to the end client without sacrificing your need to manage risk. You've somehow figured out a way to manage both, so both sides are getting the value of managing the risk on a daily basis. So you don't have to deal with historical data just once. You deal with it daily and providing value to the end client. It's brilliant. Go ahead, guys. You think you have some additional questions? We're running out of time.
No, I was just.
I think, Tuuli, just one kind of follow up to that. One of the challenges I always put in front of our team is, are we doing everything we can today, right, to make this whole experience as amazing as possible for the customer and frankly for us and for what we're trying to aspire to? So I think you need to realize as well that as much as we are leveraging, for example, daily bank transactional data today to make decisions, and we are watching things, and we're also looking at daily bank transactional data in advance of actually making a debit on the account to take a payment. Because in the US, for example, it can take 2 to 3 days to understand with the ACH system if that payment's going to clear or not. We actually know it's going to clear before we issue it. And so as we evolve the company going forward, we're just not going to make stupid decisions like blindly debiting that account, knowing it's going to be empty. We want the algorithms to proactively put in front of the customer a get out of jail free card, basically, that says, look, it looks right now like you're not going to quite make the payments that you've signed up for, but we're actually okay if you make these payments. Would you like to do that okay for the next few weeks, and then we'll bring you back? If you get a text message from an algorithm that asks you that, as opposed to having to talk to a human in collections, you're probably going to say yes to the algorithm, right? Because you don't want to admit to the human that your business is having a bad week. So there's an interesting psychology to this, I think, that where the data and this ongoing kind of underwriting model that we use and cash collections understanding and so on, it creates a very different relationship, I think, with the lender. But we're only part of the way along that journey, right? I've got more data than we're currently using, and I've got huge demands from our underwriting team to go use it. But we also have limited resources, and we have to test and champion challenge whether that data is additive or could be misleading, right? So this is going to take months, if not quarters, to kind of figure out.
Well, we're running out of time. Could go for a lot longer and unpack a lot more. But before we go, we should definitely just try to get an understanding of the company culture a little bit, because there might be people watching who would want to be part of this amazing movement and participate in some of the brilliant design thinking that takes place there. So what would you say the day in the life is like at NULA, and why would someone want to be part of the company?
It's a good question. We start with the kind of fundamental question of, is this the sort of place we would want to work every day, right? Are we doing what we can to make this a place that's really stimulating and interesting, where people can grow? And you have to understand that in order to make the transition from BFS Capital to NULA, we had to transform a lot of jobs. Many, many, many jobs did not exist, on the other side of that fence. And so in managing that transformation of a company, managing the culture and staff morale was obviously top of mind. Now I think we're a place where we hope we're less of a push-based culture and more of a pull-based culture. And what do I mean by that? We try to set an exciting journey for everybody to be on, and then we try to get out of their way so that they can be part of that journey. So, I've been a CEO for a long time, and I can tell you that motivated, energized, and smart people will outperform me any day, right? I can't think for them. The management team can't think for them. People need to kind of get it and then grow. And so we challenge ourselves all the time. Are we the kind of place where people who are smart are going to be engaged and energized and are going to find this an exciting and interesting place to be? And we test that. We test it quarterly with various polls, and we look at our ENPS scores, and we look at what's on people's minds, and we don't always get it right? There's a lot of pressure on the company as a venture-backed startup to grow and to succeed, and that pressure is relentless, right? And part of my job as a CEO is to create an environment where we're always thinking about what's next in 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 6 weeks and a year down the road, and being pulled towards it. So I'd say that culturally, we like uncomplicated humans at NULA. What do I mean by uncomplicated humans? There's no place here for politics, right? There's no place here for succeeding at the expense of someone else. There's no place here for not pulling your own weight, right? We want this to be a place where the best and the brightest want to come and work. And that allows for them to challenge us, right? I get some tough questions sometimes on town halls, right? And that's good. That's a good thing. So I think culturally, smart people doing interesting work with as much autonomy as we can give them is the kind of culture that we're trying to create here. And today, the majority of our team is sitting in Toronto, or at least our tech and data science team is sitting in Toronto. And the challenge with Toronto is everybody is here and everybody is building a tech company in Toronto. And the demand for talent is never ending. Our team gets 4 or 5 inbound LinkedIn or job requests every day practically, right? Data scientists, are you kidding? Trying to keep one of those guys around? Impossible, right? Because the salary inflation, there's all of this stuff. And so the answer to your question really is we got to create the sort of place where people want to be here and not anywhere else, despite the fact that the grass looks really green on the other side because it's well marketed over there, right? And I would tell you that is one of my biggest challenges as a CEO every single day.
Well, Mark, it's been great to have you. We can continue talking, but we're out of time. Thanks for being with us today. We wish you a lot of success. Just stay with us a few minutes as we go off the air for wrap up. Carlos, what do we got coming up next week?
Yeah.
Sure. We have one show, Tulio, next week. Because remember that next week we have our all hands, so we're not having one on Thursday. And so we have Wednesday, as a matter of fact. And that the show we're going to be having on Wednesday is with Clifton Hartsoff, the CEO of Planter with the number 3 as an E. So Planter is it's going to help us turn the world a little bit greener because it's a virtual assistant and a smart hand tool, like a combination of digital and hardware, which allows you to plan smarter, faster, and more efficiently. That's what we have right here on Dojo Live at 12 p.m. Pacific. So remember, everyone, don't miss the show. Let's get greener and be safe. Have fun.
I can't. Planter with a 3 is an E.
With a 3 is an E. With a 3, exactly. Let's remember that. With a 3 is an E.
3 with an E. And don't forget, Monday we have the recap show. So
the recap
Monday,
show. Yeah.
12 o'clock Pacific. And if any additional shows will be added, we'll announce them on Monday.
We'll announce them.
Be safe, have fun.